So we're back in Ephesians today, going through the book of Ephesians that the Apostle Paul wrote. And Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17 to 32 is where we're going to be today. And so as we think about what the Apostle Paul has written and all that he is setting up, one thing I keep coming back to is Paul is talking about the fact that we are in a battle, that we are fighting. Now, sometimes we can get over dramatic about this and overemphasize the point, but there is a war, there is a battle. And what he means is that there are competing forces in our world fighting for your allegiance, your loyalty, and your attention. We can either choose to follow Jesus or we can choose to allow these competing forces to pull us away from Jesus. That is the battle. That is what is at stake here. That is what Paul is writing against. Now, he wrote this book of Ephesians to the church in Ephesus, but a lot of the oldest manuscripts don't have the word Ephesus in there. It's to the holy people, to the church of blank. So it can be to the church of Burlington. It's to us today as we read God's word, starting in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. Paul is writing, he says, with the Lord's authority, I say to you, no longer live as the Gentiles do, for they are hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander from the life God gives because they have closed their minds and hardened their hearts against him. They have no sense of shame. They live for every kind of lustful pleasure, and they eagerly practice every kind of impurity. So we're going to pause there for a moment. We're going to finish chapter 4 today, but we're going to pause there in verse 19. Paul uses this term of light and dark. He uses darkness specifically to describe the Gentiles. Remember, there are Jews and Gentiles. Jews are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They formed the nation of Israel. They are God's chosen people, but then they were destroyed by the Babylonians and Assyrians and are no longer ruling the promised land. But the Jews are the people that are the people of the covenant, the promise, the chosen people of the Old Testament. Gentiles are everybody else. But as Paul has been writing in Ephesians, he makes it very clear that Jews and Gentiles, because of Jesus, are now equal. There's no second-rate citizen, second-class citizen. There's no hierarchy. They're all one in Jesus. But now he comes on to say that the Gentiles are living without knowledge of God. The Jews had the knowledge of God. Whether they were living for God or not, they still had the knowledge of God. But the Gentiles didn't. They were living in darkness. Now, light and dark is a common analogy we find in the New Testament. We see that walking in the light is living for Jesus. Walking in the dark is following our sinful inclinations. And so that is a common theme that we see throughout the New Testament in multiple books. But one of the things I think we forget is that walking in the light, or this concept of light and dark, sometimes we can allow the darkness to dim the light. Now, I think I've had this flashlight here before. It's really, really bright. Right? I don't know, I can't remember how many lumens. It's like some crazy amount that you don't really need, but they make it because it makes you think it's really cool, right? And so I can shine this. I can even shine it on a light and still see it for the most part. So I'm not going to shine in your eyes because I tell my kids not to do that, so I'm going to set a good example. But I have a light, and we follow it around, and it's fun to watch you guys watch it as I move it around. So I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller. And I don't know if you can see that, but I can put it on the front screen or front wall. But one of the things I think happen is we have this light, and we have certain things we filter it through things. And so I can put it in I'm going to check it. Yep, I can look at it. So you can still see the light, right? It might be a little blinding, I don't know, but it's not as bright as it was. Because we've covered it. We've allowed something else to dim the light. Or we can get even more, and we get a piece of paper now. And you'll still be able to see the light, but it will be even less. I wonder how many times as followers of Jesus we are living that way. We have the light of Jesus, but we're covering it. We're filtering it. We're not allowing it to illuminate as much as it could. Now, some of you are probably remembering the children's church song. Hide it under a bush, oh no, I'm going to let it shine, right? That's what we are called to do. We're called to allow the light of Jesus to shine through us, but yet there are competing forces in our lives that try to dim the light, that try to make it not nearly as bright. They try to convince us that it's okay to do this. Now, sometimes we try to do things that seem to be Jesus-type things, but they actually don't bring us to Jesus' conclusion. Apostle Paul has already talked about the concept of unity in the book of Ephesians. But we don't have unity at the expense of holiness. We have to be careful about that. Now there's a difference between unity and uniformity. Uniformity is I try to fit in with the group. Unity is that we submit to the Holy Spirit and to each other, and the Holy Spirit brings unity. And that's a difference. But sometimes we say, well, here's holiness. Here's the life God calls us to live. But if we compromise over here, we can be unified with these individuals or these perspectives. And so now we're drifting away from Jesus because we're trying to be unified. We're trying to be in agreement. We're trying not to rock the boat as opposed to living the holy life Jesus calls us to live. But again, earlier, the Apostle Paul talks about how we are dead in our transgressions. We're dead because of sin. And so as people, we don't need to be resuscitated. We need to be resurrected. It's not as though we just need somebody to do CPR or give us some medicine to restore us. We are dead because of sin, and the only remedy that exists is Jesus. And so Jesus can give us new life, can bring us back from the dead. And so those are some truths that Paul has established as we're already looking through the book of Ephesians. And he's talking about make sure the light in you does not get dimmed by the darkness, by these competing forces that try to pull you away from Jesus. Now, Paul continues in verse 20. He says, but that isn't what you learned about Christ. Since you've heard about Jesus and have learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, righteous and holy. So Paul is saying, get rid of the old, put on the new. Now sometimes there's certain professions in which we put on uniforms for. Probably the most common ones we think of are law enforcement officers or military individuals. They put on a uniform. And when they put on that uniform, there is a responsibility that they put on as when they put on those clothes as well. Now, they have tools as well for whatever profession that is, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's military, whether it's medical. There's all sorts of professions where you put on some type of clothing in which you take responsibility for that particular profession. Now, particularly if you're thinking of something like a police officer, we have costumes that we can purchase that have similarities to a police officer uniform. Now, for the most part, when you buy a costume, you're not trying to buy the sturdy material. They're trying to make it as cheaply as possible. So the costume that you put on is a cheap imitation. It isn't the real thing. And if you have tools that come with the costume, they're cheap plastic things that really will fall off and break in not too long. But as I think about somebody like a police officer or somebody in the military, even when they are off duty, they still have a greater responsibility than most civilians. There is a response, at least in certain circumstances, that they are never off the clock specifically. And I say that because there are a lot of people that are part-time followers of Jesus. You ever interacted with a part-time follower of Jesus on their day off? That's fun, right? And now we can joke about it, we can laugh about it, we can think of comical situations. But I'll tell you what, people who are part-time followers of Jesus frustrate everybody. They frustrate people who are trying to wholeheartedly follow Jesus. They also frustrate people who want nothing to do with Jesus. Why would I follow Jesus if this is what his followers look like? I mean, you look at your life. If you look at this last week and somebody was following you around 100% of the time, would they say, man, I want more of what this person has? Would they? Or would they say, I don't want anything that person has? Are you authentic or are you a fraud? Do you act a certain way around certain people? A lot of times people have a conversation with me, and it's always interesting that when people are talking around their pastor, in most cases they talk a certain way. Right? Or if they make a mistake, oh, I'm sorry, pastor. Now, I don't want you to be sorry. I want you to be real. But even further, I want you to be a real follower of Jesus. Right? I don't want you to be one way with me and one way with another person and one way with another person. Right? Jesus doesn't want you to be different. He wants you to be authentic because Jesus didn't come just so you could escape hell. Jesus' purpose was not to get a get-out-of-jail-free card. It was deeper than that. And if we're going to follow Jesus, he requires that we radically break from our old way of life. But what tends to happen is we try to add Jesus to our current life and just try to polish a few things up. Oh, I'm going to get rid of these behaviors, but these behaviors are okay. This might be part of my old life, but it's not that bad. Right? Those are some of the excuses, whether we verbalize them and articulate them or not. Those are some of the excuses that we have. But see, following Jesus, and here's where it gets tricky sometimes, following Jesus requires ongoing transformation. We take off our old life, we throw it away, we put on the new life that Jesus gives us. We allow the Holy Spirit to transform our thoughts and attitudes. We submit to Jesus, but we're never done. You never get to a point where you're done, where God's like, you know what? I have perfected you as good as anybody could ever be perfected. You're good. Just sit tight. That's never the message that God gives us. But not only are we sometimes inauthentic, and when we make mistakes, this is not to condemn us when we make mistakes. See, what I'm talking about is not our stumbles and our mistakes. We'll get to that in a minute. What I'm talking about is our conscious decisions to say, you know what? I'm going to keep this part of my old life. And that's dangerous. That's not what Paul is telling us to do. That's not what Jesus calls us to do. That's not the life that Jesus invites us to live. But see, with that, I fear there are not just a lot of people who will put on the uniform here and will take it off there. There are a lot of people that I fear are trying to be anonymous followers of Jesus. I don't want people to know. I'm scared what they're going to say or what they're going to think. Instead of being authentic to Jesus, we try to fit in with the crowd and make it so people like us or accept us. But Paul would come back to, don't let the darkness dim the light. Jesus has given you the light. Don't let the things of this world dim the light that's in you. But then Paul doesn't pull any punches. He gets pretty specific, up in our face, starting in verse 25. He says, stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbor the truth, for we are all part of the same body. And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for anger gives the devil a foothold. If you are a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good, hard work, and then give generously to others in need. Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to everyone who hears them. Now, so Paul has 4 things he mentions here: lies, anger, theft, and our language. Now, some of those things I think we can sometimes reason them away. Well, I don't steal. we have to be real careful when we say, well, I don't do this. Because we can talk about, do you ever do personal things on company time? You ever taken a pen from work that wasn't yours? Now sometimes we get real specific and real minor. But if we gloss over those minor issues, then we open ourselves up for bigger issues, and it gets snowballed real quickly. So on some level, I think Paul is talking about throw off the old life, get rid of your old life, live this new life that Jesus has called us to live. Don't allow those behaviors to continue to exist, those desires, get rid of them, submit them to Jesus, let him do this work in you. But then he goes into these 4 things, and we recognize sometimes we make mistakes. And it's important for us to own up to those mistakes. I've shared before how I really enjoy coaching youth sports. And it brings me joy, and I love it. I get invested in my kids and then kids in the community. But I'm not perfect. And I'm not talking about did I put the right kid in the right spot, right? Coaches will always be criticized for that. There was a particular player, not either of my boys, a particular player who I've coached a few different times. Great kid, love the kid. He wouldn't throw the ball very hard. Now, he had strength. This was not an ability issue. He just wasn't putting forth the effort. This was an effort issue. He wasn't throwing the ball very hard. And he threw the ball to me, and I say threw the ball. Let's make sure I give quotes. And he was about 30 feet away from me, and the ball maybe traveled in the air 10 feet and then rolled the rest of the way. Not a very hard throw. And so the ball finally got to me. I picked it up, and I threw it back to him, got a hard ground ball, hardish, not that hard, not hurtful. And I said, throw it hard. And he picked it up, and he made a good throw to me. And after practice, I went up to the player's parents, and I said, I was overly harsh on that, and I'm sorry. Now, one thing I do regret is I didn't go up to the player and say that. Now, I'm not abusive to the kid, right? It wasn't that big a deal, but it was one of those things where it's like, you know what? That wasn't very loving of me. I could have pushed that kid to be better without being harsh like that. Sometimes we allow our emotions to get the better of us. And you know what? We're not going to be perfect, but when we miss the mark, it's good for us to own up to that, to recognize that. See the people who are only following Jesus part-time, that are frustrating others, don't own up to their mistakes. And the inauthenticity frustrates both sides. Both the genuine followers of Jesus and those who aren't following Jesus. But when a genuine follower of Jesus owns up to their mistake, everybody's okay with that. Within reason, right? You embezzle $1 million, we got some conversations besides just okay, right? But when we make mistakes and we're authentic about it and we own up to it, Jesus honors that and says, just come back to me. Now, we probably do need to talk a little bit about anger specifically, because anger is an emotion. Anger isn't necessarily sinful. And we talk, well, God got angry. Jesus overturned the temple tables. We see all those things. But we should be honest that my anger is almost always different than God's anger. Because my anger is usually about me. It usually has some type of inward focus. And so instead of anger, I like to use the word grieved. I'm grieved by the things that grieve God. So instead of being angry by the things that anger God, I'm grieved by the things that grieve God. Because the opposite of anger is often indifference. And difference isn't healthy either. But if we hurt in the way that God hurts, we can be grieved against the injustices of this world, and we can hurt and love the way that God hurts and loves. Well, the Apostle Paul finishes the chapter in verse 30. He says, and do not bring sorrow to the Holy Spirit by the way you live, Remember, he has identified you as his own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as every type of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. When I was in high school, Axe body spray was a real big deal. I don't know if that's something that still exists in the teenage world or not, but you'd walk into a locker room or something like that, at least on the boys' side of thing, you'd walk in and you'd just be like, whoa, right? I mean, it would hit you like a ton of bricks. Right? You know, sometimes like you're driving along the road, like, ooh, is that a skunk? Like there was no question, there was a smell, right? Good or bad, there was a smell. And I think the problem, the advertising for Axe, the body spray, kind of gave you the impression that you didn't need to do any other personal hygiene things, and this would take care of it all. Right? You just spray Axe all over you, and you're good to go. And I think a lot of us use Jesus like that. We just want Jesus to cover us, so when people are around us, they only smell good things. It may be way too strong of a smell, but they don't smell the stink. See, we don't want Jesus to do that inner cleansing work. We want to hold on to those past things. But you know, in order for the light to exist in us, we have to make sure we have the right charge. You know, the charge for the flashlight only lasts so long. Then you got to get new batteries or recharge it somehow, and then you can use it again. You know, we are going out into this world of darkness, and so darkness is going to come over us. We're going to get ickiness over us, but the only way for us to remain pure is for Jesus to continually purify and cleanse us. But see, we only want the covering. We don't want anything else. And I wonder, how has Jesus transformed your life? Has he just made you feel better about yourself? Do you view him more as a lucky rabbit's foot than you do an actual king and Lord of your life? Are you allowing him to do the cleansing work in your life that you desperately need? Because Jesus isn't just a get-out-of-jail-free card. He wants to bring you new life. So we can get rid of bitterness, rage, anger. We can get rid of those things, and we can be replaced through the power of the Holy Spirit with kindness, with tenderheartedness, with forgiveness. Now, Apostle Paul used the word holy in this chapter, and typically the word holy in the New Testament is about pure or unblemished. But the word the Apostle Paul uses here is more about piety or performance type things. And this gets us real nervous, because then we get into the works righteousness category or the legalism. I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this. Check. I have successfully not done the do not do list. I've stopped those things, right? Whew, I'm holy. That's not necessarily what Paul's saying, but he is saying if we're going to follow Jesus, it's going to be showing up in our actions. We're going to get rid of these behaviors and be new over here. But I think sometimes we allow ourselves excuses. So I have this shirt here. I don't know if you like John Deere or not. That's not the point. This is not an advertisement. But you can see it's got paint on it. This is the shirt I use when I do work type stuff. If I'm out picking corn, I use this shirt because I like to blend in, apparently. If I'm out cutting firewood or so, I wear a long sleeve shirt, and this is the shirt I use. If it's cold and I'm painting, I wear this shirt. Now, this shirt is clean. I ran this shirt through the washing machine. It's clean. It doesn't smell. But this shirt is kind of battered and torn, and it's worn. And not only does it have stains on it, you can see the sleeves, the cuffs are all breaking, and it's ripped. And it's not just a pop seam. Like the fabric is ripped here. There's no repairing this. I don't know, maybe Gene can repair or Sharon, I don't know. But see, I think sometimes we're satisfied with, well, I ran it through the washing machine, so it's clean now. And this is how we live our spiritual life. Well, I said a prayer, so I'm good now. But we don't want Jesus to do the deep, hard work in our lives. We only want the surface level. We only want the covering of the Axe body spray. We don't want to do anything that's real painful. Heaven forbid we actually have to change our behavior. Who is Jesus to tell me how to live? I want to live the way I want to live. Right? Who is the Holy Spirit to convict me of behavior that doesn't honor Jesus? But see, the longer we've been part of the church, I think the more acceptable we get like this. We put on our Sunday best. So on the outside, this looks good, but on the inside, Jesus has a lot of work to do in us still. Because I don't care who you are, you're never above temptation. You're never above the tendency to follow our own sinful inclinations. But Jesus says, let me do new work in you. And this new work is ongoing. Sometimes it's a matter of just being recharged. Sometimes it's a matter of being broken so that you can be built new. But it's about submitting to Jesus. Not just something you did in the past. I hope you did in the past. If you haven't, you can do that right now. But it's, like I said, I hope you did in the past, but it's also now and tomorrow and the next day and the day after that too. The newness we put on with Jesus is every single day. So what do you need in Jesus today? Do you need a recharge? Do you need to remove the filter so people can see your bright, illuminating light that is Jesus? Do you need Jesus to somehow restore something that doesn't look like it can be restored? You need Jesus to break you down so that you can be made new. And people can say, there's something different about you. There's something whole about you. That's where we are. So I don't care where you are in your spiritual journey, this is for you. The Apostle Paul is writing to the church of the people in blank, Burlington. He's writing to you. Maybe there's some deep-seated behavioral issues. Maybe there's not. Paul isn't necessarily writing to deep-seated behavioral issues in Ephesus. Could be, but maybe not. But about recognizing where am I in my journey with Jesus and what work do I need him to do in my life right here, right now.